Praise the Lord. We're sorry we're a little late this morning, but this is the beginning of the year and things were not exactly as they should be, but we're going to begin and we're sorry that we're late. We're going to talk this morning about faith that works. We'll go to Psalms 143 and 5. I remember the days of old. I meditate on all thy works. I muse on the work of thy hands. So we're going to talk about Abraham this morning. Abraham was a man that God started talking to, and we don't know when. We don't have a time for that, but we do know that God started talking to him. And in Acts chapter 7 and verse 3, God had told Abraham to leave Ur of the Chaldees and to go to a place where I'll show you. So Abraham and told him to leave his family, told him to leave his country, and told him to leave his kindred. But did he? No. He got up and left. But he took with him his father Terah, his wife, his nephew Lot, and some more assorted people of the family. And they left and got to Haran and stopped. Well, that's not where God told them to go, but that's how far they got. And while they were there, and we don't know how long, but Terah died. When Terah died, his father died, Abraham got up, Abram, should I say, not Abraham, his name had been changed yet. Abram got up and left. And he was 75 years old, I think, when he left. And he went then to where God told him to go. He hadn't given him the name of a country yet, but he told him, I'll show you where you have to go. So Abram got up and left. And he got down to where he was going to go, and God sent a famine in the land. That famine called Abram to get up and leave and go down into Egypt. So Abram got up, left, went down into Egypt. And while he was there, he told Sarai, his wife, he said, listen, you are a fair woman to look upon. And these people will do things to me if you don't say that you're my sister. So I want you to tell them that you're my sister, so that don't be harm for me. So she told me he was a sister. And when the princes of Egypt saw her, they commended her to the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asked her to bring her to my house. Because she was a fair woman. So they brought him to the house, and at night, God began to bother him and to tell him, that you can't have this woman because this woman belongs to somebody else. So Pharaoh sent for Abram and said, listen, why did you tell me that this woman was your sister and not your wife? I've been bothered during the night, and we got to do something about this. So Abram said, well, she was a fair woman, and I thought you guys might do something to me. So I said, this is my sister, but you're right. So he said, listen, now you got to get out of here, because I don't want any trouble with your God. So they got up and got out of there, and Pharaoh gave him gifts to leave. He gave him servants, he gave him cattle, he gave him camels, he gave him goats, he gave him she-asses and things to get out of there. So he left, and he goes, and he left Haran. But he still hadn't done what God told him to do, because God told him to leave his family, to leave his country, and to leave his kindred. He hadn't done that yet. So after a while, he went back to the land where he started out, and that was in Canaan, even though he didn't have a promise to do anything in Canaan yet. But he went back, and so then God separated Lot from him. Because remember, he told him to leave everybody and go out by himself. Well, he was a man like everybody else. He took his family with him. But God separated them by putting strife between Abraham's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen. And since they were having a problem, they weren't going to be able to stay together. So Abram called Lot and said, listen, why don't you take a look out there and see where you want to go? And if you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. So Lot took a look down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and he saw all these plains that they were well watered. So he took to the east, and Abraham went to the west. Said, "Okay, I'll go. That's fine by me." And they were separated. But while he was doing it, God reminded him of his promise. Remember, I told you that when I bring you out, I take you to a land. If you leave your kindred, your family, and your country, that I'll give you a place of your home, and I'll make a place for you to be. That's my promise. So if you're looking into 13, Genesis 13:1, you see where God separated Lot. If you look at Genesis 13 and 14, Abram was reminded of God's promise. Now, he said, "Listen, I told you what I was going to do, and I'm going to do it. All you have to do is do what thus saith the Lord." If Abram was to remind himself of what God told him, a lot of his problems wouldn't have existed, but he didn't. He was looking at it as a man does and seeing what he could see. Well, after a while, while they were down there, there were 4 kings, and they got into a battle with one another. And when they came to take the land, they took Lot. When Abram saw that they had taken Lot, he got all his folks together and went down to rescue Lot, because they were still family. So he goes down and he rescues Lot. The king says, after he had beaten the other king, the king said, "Well, listen, I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you this as a present." And Abraham said, "Nope, don't give me anything. Not so much as a shoelace. I won't take a thread. I don't want anything from you. All I want you to know is that God has taken care of me." So now they were separated, and God could do what he wanted to do with Lot. So with Abraham. So Abraham was there, and God promised him a child. Said, "Listen, I'm going to give you a child." And when he did that, Abraham was about 89 years old. He goes, "Wait a minute, I'm an old man. how am I going to do this?" And God said, "I'm going to do this. I'll take care of you." So Sarah thought she might help Abram. So what she did was she said, "Listen, I'm an old woman. I'm very old. If he's 79, then if he's 89, then she's 79." And the way of a woman was through with her. She said, "I don't have it, but I can give you somebody to do it." So she sent her maidservant down to take her place, to give it to Abraham at the time, to be his wife. So he went in and Abram, and she got pregnant and had a child. But when she got pregnant, she started to despise Sarah. Abram, didn't bother him. He wasn't being despised. So he didn't do anything. But Sarah came to him and said, "Listen, you got to do something about this woman. You got to get rid of this woman, because she despises me now that she's pregnant, and I can't get pregnant." So Abram was sending her out. God found her, made promises to her, brought her back, and told Abram, said, "Listen, I told you what I was going to do for you." But Abram didn't always remember what God told him he was going to do. That's why today's lesson is faith that works. You're supposed to look back on what God has done for you. We have a song that goes, "Count your blessings, name them one by one." If you count your blessings, you will know what God will do for you, because you know what God has done for you. So there was the promise of a child. When that child got to be around 13 or 14 years old, they had another problem, because Sarah said, "Listen, this child has got to go. We can't stay here together, because I'm being despised by this woman. So you have to do something about it." So Abram went to get rid of her. Now, this boy was 13 years old, so God came back and said, "Remember, I told you that I was going to give you a child, and I'm going to give you a child of you and Sarah. So much so that I'm going to change your name from Abram to Abraham, and I'm going to change her name from Sarai to Sarah. And then you'll know what I'm going to do for you." So he changed her name, and he says in about a year's time or so, Sarah's going to come with a child. And she laughed and said, well, I'm 79 years old. I don't understand how that's going to be. But it happens. And so when Sarah got pregnant, Ishmael had to go. So Ishmael had to go. And when Ishmael left, Sarah had a child. Now, when Sarah had this child, God came back to see Abraham, said, listen, now here's what I want you to do. On the 8th day, they shall be circumcised. Every man child in this place has to be circumcised. Every man in this place has to be circumcised, so that you will know that I will keep my promise. Well, for the child, that wasn't much, but for a man and grown men, there had to be something else. But they did it. And so, they were down for a while, and God took care of them for all this while. Now, Abraham would never remember what God had done for him. Time and time again, when God had done something for him, Abraham would forget about it and not just do what thus saith the Lord. So what has happened over this time is when God does something for the saints should remember how good God has been to them. And what you do is you begin to say, well, Lord, this is what I need. This is what I want. I know you can do it because you've done it before. You've done it for others, and you can do it for me. Well, at times, we tend to forget what God has done for us. That's not good, It's not good at all. But God will always be there saying, this is the way, walk ye in it when you turn to the right or to the left. Now, there came a time again when there was a famine in the land, and Abram, remember what he had done before, went down into another country to get help, and the king's name was Abimelech, and when he got there, he told Sarah, once again, hey, you tell them that you're my sister. It worked before, it'll work again. So he told Abimelech that Sarah was his sister. That night, God began to bother Abimelech, going, listen, that's another man's wife. You can't have her. If you do, I'll tell you the things that I'm going to do to you. And he said, wait a minute. That's not my fault. It's not my problem. That's Abraham's fault. But I tell you what I'll do. I'll call Abraham and I'll tell him. So he called Abraham. Abraham come in and said, listen, why did you tell me that this woman was your sister and not your wife? Had you told me this was your wife, I never would have tried to take her from you. But you told me this was your sister. So Abraham said, well, I thought that she was a fair woman, that you might do something to me if you knew she was my wife. So she is my sister. She's my father's daughter. She's just not my mother's daughter. So he married his half sister, and he was using her to get in and out of trouble. But that's not what God had told him to do, because remember, God had set them together as a pair, and God gave them a child. Now, there came a time in Abram's life, after God had been dealing with him for such a long time, that he had this child named Isaac. And God came to him one day and said, Abraham, I want you to offer to me Isaac, thine only son Isaac, for a burnt offering. And I'll tell you where to go. And you take him and offer him there. So Abraham got ready, got his son Isaac, that took me in to go with him, got firewood to take with him, took fire in his hand, and started off. So they made a journey of about 3 days, got into the mountain, and said, told his other guys, said, listen, you guys wait right here. I and the lad will go and return unto you. Well, wait a minute. God told him to offer him for a sacrifice. So why now is Abraham saying, I and the lad will go and return unto you? I'm under the impression that Abraham began to think during this time that he was walking to where he was going, what God had done for him, what God had said to him, what God had promised him. And once he got to understand what God had promised him, he was willing to offer his son unto God, knowing that even though he had to offer him, that God would give him back to him. Now, that's a lot of faith. Hey, I don't know what it is that causes a man to say, okay, I'll offer my son, but it has to be great faith in God. His faith had begun to work. I mean, of all the situations, of all the conversations he had with God over time, apparently they hadn't taken place. But when it came to his son, his memory was then jogged, and he began to remember what God had promised him, what God was going to do for him. So he takes him off, and they go off into the woods, into the mountain, and he was talking to Isaac, and Isaac said, Father, you know, we have a wood for a sacrifice, and we have the fire for a sacrifice, but where's the sacrifice? And Abraham told him, the Lord would provide himself a sacrifice. Well, now I don't know what Isaac was thinking, but I can guess what Abraham was thinking. Whatever I got to do, God's going to give him back, because he told me that in him all the nations of the earth were going to be blessed, that in him God was going to make kings and queens out of him. And so once he had done that, I said, then I guess I'll trust God. When we stand here today and we talk to you, we have to learn to trust God. There come a time when things get kind of hard for us. What should we do? We should trust God. So they went into the woods, into the mountain. Abraham put the wood on, made an altar, put the wood on the altar, bound his son, laid his son on the altar, took the knife, drew back his hand to slay him. And God said, Abraham, don't do it, for I know now that you withhold nothing from me, for I know now that you will do what thus saith the Lord. And he looked around, behind him was a ram in the bush. That ram was sacrificed unto the Lord. Abram and his son went back. So if you go down in like the beginning with the 11th chapter of Genesis up to the 22nd chapter of Genesis, you can find out a lot of conversations that Abram had with God. And those things had to be back to your memory. Because remember, when God tells you to do a thing, he means for you to do a thing. He will make sure that you have the strength to get it done. God will make sure that you have the strength to get done whatever he asks you to do. He will not ask of you more than you are able to do. He will not ask of you more than you are able to do. And as a consequence, whatever God asks you to do, you can do. So you say, well, but he asked him to give his son. He asked him to offer his son. He never told him to kill his son. He told him to offer his son. So what did Abram do? He offered his son. Okay, now we say, yeah, but the only way to do that offering is to kill him. Well, that's what Abram thought, but that's not what God meant, because God has never asked anybody to sacrifice, to do human sacrifice. He's not that kind of God. But when he told him to offer it. He was looking in Abraham's heart and seeing what was in there, knowing that Abraham would do what thus saith the Lord. Now we're here today and we say, well, how does that apply to me? Whatever God has asked you to do, you can do it. For each and every one of us, they turn out to be different things. For each and every one of us, they turn out to be things that apply just to us. I mean, would he ask me to offer my son? No, because he doesn't do that. He did that back then for us. And remember, the Bible is written for our admonition and our learning upon whom the end of the earth has come. The Bible is written so we might know what thus saith the Lord. So whatever God has asked you to do, remember, you can do it. There was a time, starting in 2011, that I began to have some problems. And these problems were financial. And I asked the Lord for help. I thought he was going to help me one way, but he helped me another. I thought he would figure out a way for me to pay my bills and not have to rely upon anybody else. But what he did was, I had to file bankruptcy. I didn't like it, but I had to do it. I talked to him about it. I said, Lord, now what am I going to do? So I talked and I talked and I prayed and I prayed, and it came to me to file bankruptcy. Well, I filed bankruptcy, and come to find out that I had more problems than I knew. I owed more money than I knew. But God took care of that. After I filed bankruptcy, I found out how much I owed. And I go, what? But God knew how much. And God took care of it. So I came out of bankruptcy and I didn't owe a thing. But here's the deal. I filed bankruptcy in June. I was relieved of bankruptcy in October. And the day before I got the letter that says I was out of bankruptcy and that I was through with it, I got a letter saying, you want to buy a new car? I go, no. I go, how do they know that? How do they know that? Because what they do is they look at the courts and see what's done. And they knew that I was out of bankruptcy before I did. So once I got out of bankruptcy, I said, well, Lord, I thank you. I thank you so very much. And I went on about my business. And a little bit later, I had a problem with my car. And I didn't have the money to get it fixed. So I said, well, I just have to deal with what I have to deal with. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get the car. And a friend of mine offered me his car. I said, what? He said, listen, I know that you're having problems, but I got a car that you can drive. I go, I beg your pardon? He says, I got a car that you can drive. I'll loan you this car. And while he's talking, I'm saying, Lord, would you do that for me? You would do that. And I didn't ask and I didn't tell him, but you would do this. And the answer there was yes. And while I'm thinking about it, I began then to think back over my life and what God has done for me. And I'm going, when I wasn't saved, he did stuff for me. After I got saved, he did more things for me. And I'm going, well, if he would do all of that for me and I wasn't saved, he would do all this for me after I got saved, then I shouldn't be surprised what God has done for me now that I know about it. He did things for me. I came up here to go to school in 1974, and I didn't apply. Somebody applied for me because I was tired of school. 4 years of school, driving 50 miles one way every day, going to work before I went to school, going to work after I went to school, and I was tired, and I wasn't going to apply for grad school. But I got a letter one day that says, congratulations, you've been accepted at the U of M School of Wildlife Management with a full ride. And I'm going, where does this come from? And see, at that time, I didn't know God. I'm not ashamed now, but I didn't know God. I thought I did, but I didn't know him. And I'm thinking, well, am I going to this school? And I thought about not going, but then I go, wait a minute. They found a way for me to go. So I determined to come to school. I get to school. I go to U of M, and this is on the 24th of August, 1974, and we go over to the office building to get a room. And I go over there, and the room is packed with people trying to get room. So when it comes to my turn, I finally get up there and I said, I gave him my name and said, I need a room. There you go. We don't have any more room. They're all gone. And I'm going, oh man. And somebody hollered in the back, he can have my room. I turned around. I had no idea who was speaking. So I turned around and looked, and there was this guy with his hands up. He can have mine. I'm going downtown to stay with somebody else. And I'm going, what? You got me up here, and now you've given me a room. He gave me that room. I go over to the room, and there's this guy living next door to me. So when I go and I saw him in there, and it was at lunchtime. So I go, hey man, you going to lunch? He says, no. I said, why not? Because I can't afford to go. My father had open heart surgery, and I'm barely making it to school. So I can't afford to go. So I go, well, listen, I have food in my room, and you're welcome to have anything that you want. He says, they cannot leave. So who's that turn out to be? It turned out to be the guy who introduced me to Bethlehem Temple. When I got introduced to Bethlehem Temple, I didn't think much of it because I was homeless that night when I came up to see him out of Ann Arbor. I had a job, couldn't get a place to stay. My uncle had money, knew folks in Inkster, couldn't get a place to stay. One of my professors went down and told the guy, I said, listen, I'll pay 3 months worth of rent. He'll pay first month and last month. Couldn't get a place to stay. So I came up here, and it was the 21st of January of 1977. And so I'm visiting. He goes, hey, man, listen, since you have no place to stay, why don't you stay with me? I said, do you know how far it is for me to go back and forth to work where I stay? He says, it beats living in your car. I said, yeah, and I thought about it. So I go, okay. And that was on Friday, January 21st. January 23rd, I came here, and that's the day Roots came in. Elder Brown was preaching, and he made a call, said, for those who want to be saved. And I'm going, if I'm going to stay with this guy, I'm going to have to get saved. Didn't know what it meant. I'm going to have to get saved. So I said, raise my hand. And they told me to come up. And I thought it was like where I came from. I came from a Baptist church. What we do is you raise your hand to be baptized, and they wait till the spring to take you out. Well, they didn't wait till the spring. Charles Edmond said, come on, man, let's go upstairs and get you rest. Get me ready for what? Said to get baptized. You said you wanted to get baptized. So I said, yeah. And I thought about it because snow was deep. Snow was about waist deep that day, and it was fair cold. So I go up and get baptized. I come down, they started asking me, Sister Jones, Sister Corbin Jones, first thing she said was, you want to tarry for the Holy Ghost? But I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that meant. I said, no. So we left. I got the back door. Snow is deep. Snow is deep. So I went and said, hey, it's not cold out here. My hair is wet, and I'm not getting cold. But as I look back now over my life, I can watch God move in my life to get me to where I am today. Abraham finally remembered what God had done for him and began to say, all right, Lord, I'll do what you want me to do. That's what saints have to do today. Look back over your life. Count your blessings. Watch what God has done for you, and your faith will be increased. So just remember, trust in God, and everything will be all right.